So, who would like to start?
Hi guys, welcome to Zoned. It's Z here, and today I'm joined by Nai, and we're just going to give off the top of the dome thoughts on Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't seen the show, we will be discussing in-depth spoilers, so do not watch the whole video if you haven't seen the show yet, if you don't want to be spoiled. My spoiler-free review is, it's fucking brilliant. Go ahead, and if you're a fan of the MCU, you need to watch this show. It's the best thing they've done since Endgame, and that's pretty much all I can say without spoiling stuff.
First things first, the show is called Falcon and Winter Soldier, right? And I would say that, I said this to you prior as well, it feels that the show is maybe 60-40, 70-30 in Falcon's favour. Once again, it's not a bad thing. It doesn't detract from the show in any way, shape or form, but it's something that I noticed that, you know, Falcon is a lot more, he's done a lot more justice than Sam. Than Bucky. Bucky's character, once again, maybe he didn't need as much going forward because he's not changing who he is. He is still the Winter Soldier / Bucky for the time being anyway, whereas Falcon was going to become the new Captain America, and I think they absolutely nailed him becoming Captain America.
Yeah, definitely.
They did things like, you know, the whole fact that it's a black man who's going to become a symbol of, a superhero symbol for America. They touched on race, but it never came across as preachy. It was always done relatively subtly, or when it was kind of done on a surface level, it was warranted. It didn't feel forced. It didn't feel, you know, it felt natural. It felt earned, for lack of a better way of putting it. I know we're going to touch on this more later, but I would say Carly Morgenthau's character was probably the weakest character. Probably not her fault.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I hate to ride on her, but like, it was her fault. I never once thought she was very monotone in her delivery of everything, and I feel like this is one of the very, very rare occasions where they miscast the character because I just wasn't feeling the character at all. Like none of her delivery ever sort of, it felt forced. And I don't know if it's because I'm a Brit, but like every time she spoke, I'm like, nobody talks like that.
Do you think I'm making a mistake? Making more of us?
Before we delve into the performances though, I just want to touch on some stuff you said. For example, regarding the 60-40 or maybe even 70-30% ratio of Falcon to Bucky in the show, like you say, it worked. I liken it to, for example, Batman and Robin. If the title is Batman and Robin, you know Robin is quote-unquote the side man. Yeah. And I do actually like that for the first time, the white guy was the side character, and the black guy was the protagonist. Yeah. Because if you think of Rhodey, if you think of Sam, other than Black Panther himself in his own movie, the black characters have always been sidekicks to the white guy. So you've got Sam was always the sidekick to Cap, Steve Rogers, and you've always got Rhodey was the sidekick to Iron Man. Yeah,
so this is the way that you handle certain topics or issues that relate to our current social climate. When you look at the feminist scene that was done in Endgame, and you compare it to how race is handled in Falcon and Winter Soldier, it's literally night and day. It never felt forced. It had nuance. It made sense in the context of the world and its characters.
Yeah.
Like the speech Sam gives during the last episode was amazing. Yeah, it was a bit on the nose, but
it was still, it still resonated.
It was made obvious that Falcon was going to become Cap in the end, but they did a much better job of making a character earn that title than I thought that they would.
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be a case of it's serviceable and, you know, they got to the conclusion, but the journey itself wasn't that, you know, was just, you know, okay. But no, in the end it ended up being, it was executed there flawlessly in my opinion.
Isaiah Bradley, I wanted to comment on as well because he had very little screen time, but I'd never seen that actor before. I don't even know the actor's name. I'd have to look it up, but he did a hell of a performance. Like every single scene that he was in, I ended up with like a lump in my throat. It was just literally stole every scene that he was in, and it was some of the most emotional parts of the series involved Isaiah Bradley.
Sam, Bucky and Isaiah, for the most part, the performances were really solid. Like the end part when Sam is talking to the, Bucky is talking to the Asian gentleman, I can't remember his name, forgive me.
Yeah.
And he's like, when he's explaining that he killed his son and his voice breaks, that actually touched me.
Yeah.
I was like, shit. Like,
literally. Sebastian Stan as a whole really surprised me in this because he didn't really get much acting in the other movies he's been in, and he didn't really get much to do in terms of acting in those things. So I didn't know how good of an actor he was until this show.
But it's
So
like you said earlier, his character before was the foreboding, broken kind of man. He
sort
was
of
quite
emo.
quiet in the background. He couldn't,
Yeah.
he couldn't stretch his acting chops, so to speak, because there's nothing to do.
Exactly.
If you're told to just be in the background, foreboding with a gun and a bloody metal arm, how can you act that well? Do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
But,
But from the first episode where he's speaking to the therapist, and like Stan nails that 1,000-yard stare that is like reminiscent of people with PTSD, as he's having his sort of flashbacks in his head about the stuff that he's done. Last week's episode, where without any dialogue, he conveyed so much emotion of finally being free of the brainwashing of the Winter Soldier. Well, he did have a tiny bit of dialogue, but it was mostly just acting without words. Even Anthony Mackie, who is relegated to the occasional comedic quip in the movies, he got a lot more to do here. I did find him, the character of Falcon, a lot more stoic in this, but he still did have that signature Falcon comedy, which I liked.
If you remember the first 2 or 3 episodes when he's going back and forth with Bucky, he very much was that same character. You know, he was always trying to joke with Bucky, little digs at Bucky, obviously nothing malicious. But then by the end, he very much more, he grew, he actually grew as a character. He felt a lot more weighty by the end. He felt like he realized what it actually meant to hold the mantle. Also, what about fucking
Wyatt Russell? I was about to say,
character?
basically Wyatt Russell is playing John Walker, who's a highly awarded soldier who gets chosen as the next replacement for Captain America at first. And he's slightly unhinged. He's been through a lot of stuff in his own life. He's got a lot of pressure to obviously live up to the mantle of Captain America, and it doesn't go great. And Wyatt Russell, in particular, the scene in the courtroom in episode 5 or maybe episode 4, that's what really cemented him as a good actor for me, when he has this big speech about how he has been the tool that they designed and they built. He's done the work that they've told him to do, and he did it well. That for me solidified him as an actor in this show, and I'm glad that he's sticking around and has a future in the MCU as a US agent.
He does what he's supposed to do well. You're not supposed to like him, and you don't like him, but because you're supposed to not like him, you like him.
Exactly. Yeah, he does it very well. And in the end, I do feel for him in many moments. Like when Lamar dies, like they do make him relatable enough, or at the very least empathetic enough, so that he's not a fully fledged villain. There's levels to it, and I'm just glad that he's back. I mean, I highly doubt Wyatt Russell would ever see this, but if you see this, you've got my ratings. You're not my Cap, but you are my US agent.
He redeemed himself in the end as well, I believe. The scene when he could have chased Carly, or he could have, even though he failed, he still did choose the right thing. Speaking of that scene where he does try to pull the van off the scaffolding, I think it was, what did you think of the action?
Action was phenomenal. The action in this was just amazing. I love how they showed how Sam can use the wings in close quarter combat, because we haven't had a lot of that before, and it was very inventive, very creative ways of using the wings in close quarter combats throughout the show, in all the fights he's had. That I thought was brilliant. The
way that they shot the action scenes of Sam, especially at the end, made you remember, okay, they're super soldiers and he isn't, but at the same time he still managed to hold his own for the most part, and he was using the shield and his thrusters and his wings to compensate the difference between the abilities that he had and the abilities. I think they conveyed that really well, surprisingly. Any negatives at all to do the show? Any negatives that you have?
Really, it's only 2 negatives. Obviously, I've mentioned Kylie Morgenthal's performance. I wasn't a huge fan of the performance, but the Flag Smashers as a whole. But now it's worth mentioning, for anyone who isn't aware, that they had to rewrite basically the entire show because of COVID-19. Because originally the Flag Smashers were going to be using biological weapons and were going to cause a worldwide pandemic. Now, obviously, for obvious reasons, they thought COVID happened, and they rewrote it and changed the story so it's more about the super soldier serum. So it kind of shows a little bit the Flag Smashers were quite underdeveloped. For example, the final speech Sam gave about all these disposed people because of the blip, so on and so forth, made me care more about these disposed people than anything the Flag Smashers said or did throughout the show. I did think the Flag Smashers weren't written. I suppose it's unfair to say weren't written well because obviously they had to rush that storyline, but they could have used a bit more development. I think.
We could have just even had a scene where we saw how things were prior to the blip, how things were during the blip, and do you know what I mean? We did, because we didn't see any of it, that we just, from their dialogue, as how we kind of had to realize or understand what they had gone through and what had changed, but without seeing that change, or without them going into too much depth, it fell flat. There wasn't really, it wasn't really buffed out at all. And then you had, Sharon Carter being the power broker, being the person who was pulling the strings the whole time.
That leads me to my second flaw, which or negative about the show, which is for me quite a lot bigger than the first one, is the character of Sharon Carter. Because I don't know if this is again a result of the rewrites, but it does not make sense to me for a character. Admittedly, we haven't seen her that much in the MCU, but obviously she is based on a pre-existing character who, for 60 years in the comics, has been a hero and a stand-up citizen. I mean, she's the niece of Peggy Carter, who founded S.H.I.E.L.D. She has that moral integrity, so it didn't make sense to me how in supposedly 2 years since coming back from has it been? No, it hasn't even been 2 years since they've come back. So, because supposedly, according to Endgame, Sharon was blipped. So she was gone for those 5 years. So we're supposed to somehow believe that she came back from the blip and then almost instantly became the most powerful criminal mastermind in the most in the largest crime city in the world. This could all be redeemed if it turns out that Sharon is a Skrull, because obviously we know the MCU, or at least the Disney Plus shows, are leading towards Secret Invasion, which for anyone unfamiliar with the comics is when an evil sect of Skrulls invade Earth and take the place of a whole bunch of humans. And we did have the introduction of a character called Contessa, I can't remember the rest of her name, Val, played by Julia JLF, I can't remember her full name, Juliet something Dreyfus. Anyway, in the comics, she was the first person Nick Fury discovered had been replaced by a Skrull. So since she was introduced in the show, that makes me think Sharon isn't actually Sharon and it has been replaced by a Skrull, which would make a lot more sense for why she'd done a full 180. Because if it is just a case of that is Sharon Carter, they messed up, she didn't actually get blipped, they didn't do a good enough job of explaining how someone like that would go fully evil, because the end credit scene even sets up the fact that she is still evil and is still playing is still being two-faced essentially, and she's been pardoned and readmitted into the US government, but we see her on the phone saying about how now basically she's a spy of some sort. The flaws I had, the issues I took with WandaVision as a series, which weren't necessarily narrative related, it was more to do with choices by the showrunner, were enough to detract from my overall score of the series.
Yeah, same.
Whereas with Falcon and the Winter Soldier, that wasn't the case at all, because like I say, I loved the performances, I loved the story for the most part. I loved the interactions between Bucky and Sam. I loved the John Walker subplot. The trailers made me think the comedy was going to feel very forced, because they chose some of the weaker jokes for the very first trailers of the movie, and I was a bit worried that the jokes weren't going to land. But then when I actually watched the show, pretty much all the jokes landed for me.
Yeah. But yeah, all in all, wrapped up. So very good series. If you were left with a sour taste in your mouth or whatnot after WandaVision, definitely watch this. If you haven't seen the MCU, I would still say watch this. It still works. Marvel are very good at making shows that, for the most part, work by themselves. So yeah, even if you're not a fan, it's a very decent action series. It's only 6 episodes that are no longer than, say, an hour each. I don't think that any of them actually even are an hour. Correct me if I'm wrong. 45 minutes. So yeah, definitely watch it. This has been Zoned. I have been Nye.
I've been Z.
Let us know what your thoughts are in the comments. Leave a like and a subscribe, and a share would be greatly appreciated. Yeah, thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.
Peace.